Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're looking into what might just be one of the most absolutely mind-blowing historical mysteries ever unearthed. Okay, I want you to picture this. Buried beneath 40 feet of solid mud in southern Iraq, at an ancient site called Nippur, archaeologists pull up a clay tablet. It's literally the size of a human hand, and it is covered in cuneiform script so incredibly dense and precise that it took scholars nearly 2 decades to even agree on what it said. But as you're going to see, this isn't just some ancient grocery list or a record of grain sales. What we are discovering in this tiny tablet fundamentally challenges the entire fabric of human history.
Okay, let's dive into this. When this tablet, officially cataloged as E29113, was finally translated in its complete form back in 2004 by a joint team, multiple independent groups actually arrived at the exact same conclusion. But here's the wild part. Several scholars hesitated to even publish it. And it wasn't because it was a fake. No, it passed every single authentication test they threw at it. They hesitated because of its absolutely terrifying existential implications. Look at this quote from a private letter by the lead scholar. He called it the most disturbing document he had encountered in 30 years. Why? Because it outlines in very specific detail a deliberate, engineered system of human control. And that whole system begins with their very first objective.
Section 1. Creating the labor force. To really grasp what terrified these scholars, we have to realize that the Sumerians didn't write about the Anunnaki as these magical, mystical sky gods, not at all. Instead, they documented them as physical, bureaucratic managers, complete with ranks, highly practical agendas, and honestly some pretty terrible middle management skills. Reaching back through 6,000 years of recorded history, this translation tells us exactly why the Anunnaki came here in the first place. They needed to extract physical resources, most likely gold, and the work was just incredibly grueling. Well, because they weren't exactly interested in doing the manual labor themselves, they engineered a biological solution. A figure named Enki actually combined Anunnaki genetic material with the existing primitive Earth biology to create what the text called the Lulu. Basically, the first human workers, built specifically to serve and maintain a civilization that wasn't even their own.
But here is where things went completely off the rails for management. During this creation process, Enki added a modification that the rest of the team definitely had not approved. He gave humans the capacity for self-referential consciousness. Simply put, that's the ability of a mind to actually observe itself observing. And this absolutely terrified the Anunnaki Council. Just listen to this warning from Enlil, the chief executive of the operation. If humans become aware of their own awareness, they become uncontainable. The Anunnaki had apparently seen this happen across other worlds. Every single time a species became truly self-aware, they broke free.
Section 2. Architecture of the prison.
So, the Anunnaki faced a massive problem. They had learned the hard way that you cannot simply destroy a self-aware species. Once a species reaches that specific cognitive threshold, some pattern of it is always going to propagate. Since they couldn't just scrap their rogue labor force, they had to contain us epistemically. Meaning, they literally had to build a prison for our minds to limit what we were even capable of knowing. Now, the Sumerians didn't use modern sci-fi terms like a matrix. Instead, they called this containment system the woven world or the layered sky. The tablet describes a constructed reality, an overlay placed directly over the actual physical substrate of existence. And you know what the most insidious part of this is? It was assembled gradually, over generations of human experience, so that each new generation simply inherited the overlay, assuming it was just the completely natural order of the universe. And this brilliantly illustrates how the prison was actually maintained, because it wasn't upheld by physical force or Anunnaki guards with weapons. It was engineered through human-operated systems that kept populations constantly, endlessly distracted from finding inner stillness. Organized religion was set up to redirect human consciousness outward toward unreachable intermediaries. Governance systems were quite literally designed to create perpetual, exhausting conflict over surface resources and identities. Sound familiar? They even went so far as to restrict language, actively removing precise vocabulary for states of consciousness, so humans couldn't even formulate the thoughts required to perceive the deeper reality.
Section 3. Humanity's hidden resonance capacity. But despite this vast, macro-level system of control, there was a microscopic biological oversight. A huge flaw that the Anunnaki completely missed when they originally mixed their genetics with Earth biology. We have to shift our focus inward here, because the key to escaping the woven world was accidentally built right into the human form itself. The tablet identifies this hidden flaw as the resonance capacity.
And according to the translation, this isn't some technological tool or an external device you have to find. It is an inherent, native biological ability of human flesh to literally vibrate at the exact frequency of the true reality beneath the woven world. It was just a completely unintended byproduct of our unique genetic mixing.
So, the crucial point is the distinct difference between the creators and the created. The Anunnaki perceived reality strictly from the outside. Their position as managers and protected observers gave them immense power, sure, but it completely prevented them from going deeper. They simply couldn't dissolve their observer egos. Humans, on the other hand, are totally immersed in the physical substrate. We are vulnerable meat, but because of that very immersion, we are biologically tuned to vibrate with the deepest levels of reality. The creators accidentally built a species that could literally dissolve the prison walls from the inside out.
Section 4. The breakout mechanism.
Let's move to and see how this builds into something truly profound. Because it turns out, the Anunnaki were trapped too. They were confined to their own dimensions as observers, operating between worlds but unable to access the deepest levels of the substrate. And the scholarly consensus points to something incredible. The Anunnaki weren't just trying to contain humanity. Some of them secretly hoped humans would successfully break out, acting as instruments to reach levels of reality that the gods themselves were completely locked out of. E2911 actually outlines the escape manual to do this, in 3 exact internal stages. First is stilling the self-story, quieting that endless internal narrative the mind uses to locate itself in a social hierarchy. Second is opening the interior axis, which means aligning what the Sumerians called the 7 fires along the center column of the body. And third is the recognition of recognition, the exact precise moment awareness becomes aware of itself, bypassing the entire engineered overlay.
Now, when you impartially apply this manual to other foundational Sumerian texts, everything changes. The famous myth of the goddess Inanna descending into the underworld? It isn't an allegory about agricultural cycles or the seasons at all. Viewed strictly through the lens of E29113, it suddenly reads as a step-by-step technical instruction manual for this exact internal biological breakout. Passing through 7 gates represents moving consciousness through 7 stages of overlay dissolution. Surrendering her crown and jewels at each gate, that's the shedding of the constructed identity in the self-story. And arriving completely powerless, viscerally hanging as, quote, meat on a hook, that represents the total dissolution of the observer position, which is required to access the true substrate of reality.
Section 5. A message to the future.
This brings us to the ultimate historical mystery. The Sumerian priests of Nippur were deeply embedded intermediaries. They were the heavily monitored maintainers of the woven world. So who in the world would dare write down the exact mechanisms of the overlay and the precise manual for breaking out of it? Well, scholars generally debate 3 primary theories. It could be the voice of Enki, the Anunnaki creator who historically intervened on humanity's behalf. It could be an ascended human who actually successfully navigated the substrate and left a map behind for us. Or, most chillingly, it could be a leaked internal memo. This is actually the most direct reading of the evidence, that this was classified Anunnaki Council documentation. Its survival in the mud of southern Iraq represents either the greatest accident or the single greatest act of sabotage in human history.
But what makes this tablet entirely unique among all Sumerian texts is how it ends. It totally abandons the third-person historical tone, and it shifts to address someone in the future. "We have written what we were shown," it reads. "We do not know if you will find these words when the veil is thinnest or when it is thickest. They were afraid not of what you have been, of what you are capable of becoming." It is a 6,000-year-old bureaucratic text suddenly dropping all pretense to speak directly to you, right now.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is it captures the absolute existential weight of this whole discovery. Think about it. The Anunnaki built an entire architecture of reality just to keep humanity distracted with conflict, noise, and surface features. They were terrified of humans becoming quiet enough to activate their native biological resonance capacity. Yet, despite thousands of years of this heavily engineered overlay, the warning written on that ancient piece of clay somehow survived, and the biological capacity sitting inside of you, it remains completely intact.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Think about the constant noise, the rigid structures of modern life, the endless daily distractions. Do you feel the invisible architecture of the overlay in your life right now? Are we too busy fighting over the interior furnishings of the prison to realize we have the innate biological ability to simply dissolve the walls? It's definitely something to think about the next time you try to find a moment of true, absolute stillness. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you.